Good morning. Welcome to those of you that are joining us for our Women's Bible Study. If you don't know anything about us, first you can just go online to womensbiblestudy.com. Get all the information you want about us. We are right in the middle of a series called Encouraging Truth. I'm not even certain we're in the middle of it. I think this is going to go on forever, it kind of sounds like. We started this series because of coronavirus, thinking it would last just a few weeks. We are on number 41. So our goal is to give you some kind of an encouraging biblical truth, to put these out on Monday so you have something to hang on to all week long. So that's the goal for this particular series. So today I want to start by telling you about something that happened 10 years ago to me, which is actually where I'm getting this encouraging truth lesson from today. And this is encouraging truth number 41. And it's this: you can make every day count. Now, some of you, if you've been coming to Bible study a long time, you'll have heard this story already before. But I'd been teaching Bible study for I don't know how many years, probably 8 or 9 years, but it was just part-time. It was a few girls here and there, and it wasn't anything like it is today. But it was about 2010. And I was doing Bible study, but I was also working at my husband's business, our family business with our boys. And I started feeling like I really needed to quit work and actually full-time work on Bible study and make it more of a Bible study thing than just a little part-time thing. So that's kind of what I was thinking. So we were in Flagstaff at the time, and I knew that I needed to talk to Rob about this because he likes having me down at the office. But I felt really, really convinced that this is what God was calling me to do. So before I was going to go talk to Rob about it, I had this thought that I'm assuming came from God, and the year 2020 popped into my mind. Now, at the time, I had no idea what that meant. Like 2020, that's 10 years from when it was at the time. It was this long way off. I didn't even know what it meant. And I kept saying, okay, does that mean that God's going to give me 10 years and then I'm going to die in 2020? Does it mean the ministry would die in 2020? Or is 2020 the year that God would take our little women's Bible study and do something grand with it and get it to where the gospel and the message of Jesus and how to grow in your faith can get out into the world even more than, because back then we weren't doing anything like that. So I started thinking about what that meant, because in 2010, there was no videotaping. There was no cameras. We didn't start that until 2012. There was no YouTube. I mean, think about that. No Roku, no apps. No one even knew what an app for your phone was back then. What it was for us was a Bible study where people would actually have to drive to at a restaurant, and then we moved into a movie theater. So if you actually wanted to come to Bible study, you would have to come in person. You would have to drive to get there. So I started talking to Rob about this, and I explained what my thought process was, that I need to spend more time doing this. And so I quit my job down there, and I started doing Bible study full time. But in the back of my mind, I always felt like I had 10 years. And I like I said, I didn't even know what that meant back then. But for me, I knew this, and I knew this is what the Bible said, and this is what I want to encourage you with today. Psalms 39:4 says this: "Show me, O Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting is my life. You have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is nothing before you. Each man's life is but a breath." Based on that, I knew that no matter what these 10 years meant, I wanted to do those 10 years well. Psalm 139:15 says this: "My frame was not hidden from you when I was in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." So knowing that and feeling like 2020, there was something going on there, I knew that God had given me a number of days to live on this earth. But regardless if that's what God was talking about, like how many days I had on earth or what would happen with the ministry, I knew more than anything that I wanted to end my life or end Bible study or end whatever the end was supposed to be, caring more about the things of God than the things of the world. And I wanted to end my life telling people that there's more to life, there's an eternity. And Jesus is the only way to God. And you have to have a relationship with him if you want to spend eternity in heaven. And there's all these things that became of the utmost importance for me to tell people. Psalm 90 was a prayer of Moses, and he said this in verse 12, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." So armed with the knowledge of whatever 10 years meant, then it made me really sit back and evaluate my life. So let's say I had 10 years to live. Of course, being with Rob and the kids and my parents and the grandkids, that would be of utmost importance. But what could I do in those 10 years that would matter spiritually in people's lives? And what I came to was, it's all about Jesus. We have to get the gospel out. We have to help people grow up in their faith. Because I knew what Paul said in Philippians 1:21. For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. And I do believe that dying is gain, like eternity, where there's no pain, no heartache, no COVID, no sadness, no trials. That's really something to look forward to. But so is living on this earth something we should be excited to do. Because Paul knew this. Living is a good thing if we do it right, which means this: to live is Christ. See, Paul knew what we all should know as followers of Jesus is that for all the days that God gave Paul, his job would be to make his life about Jesus, to actually live for Christ, not to live for your hobby or your money or your job or your relationships. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important, because they are, but Jesus has to come over and above all of those things. He has to come first. What you think about first in the morning, opening your Bible, reading it, finding out what he wants you to do, praying during the day, looking for people to tell people about him. Like, he comes first over all of those things, because that's our job. A lot of times he wants to use us in our kids' life, our parents' life, our neighbors' lives. He wants to use our hobby. He wants us to be a good witness as we're doing whatever our hobby is, so that if we're given the opportunity, people will listen to us when we tell them that they need Jesus in their life. It's about, like, let's say your money. Like, using your money to further the gospel. God has blessed you with money, so now you turn around and use that to bless others. It's about your job, being at work, because you know you have to work to make money, but being the best employee with the best work ethic and the greatest integrity, so that if people ever ask you, you can say, you know what, I do this because of Jesus. Because Paul knew this. His life mattered, and your life matters too. Never forget that. Your life, the amount of time that God has given you on this earth, really, really matters spiritually. And I want to go there today. Here's why. Because if you are a Christian, then you have a purpose in this world. Acts 17:26 says this: from one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them in the exact places where they should be. In other words, God says, I have placed you in your neighborhood in this particular year, this time frame, I have it all planned out for you. He's saying, I've put you at this exact place. Why? Verse 27, God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us. That's our job. We have the most important job on this planet, which is this: helping people be reconciled to God. We have to remember that every person that we meet, every person that we know, they're separated from God if they don't know Jesus. Their destination is separation from him forever, for all eternity, in a place called hell. And here's what we need to know. God has saved us and given us the privilege of taking the good news of Jesus to all the people around us. It is a privilege to do that. And that's why our Encouraging Truth 41 says this: you can make every day count. You can make every day count as a follower of Jesus. We can be light in a very, very dark world if we can start changing our perspective on life. I was thinking about this. We need to be excited about life, excited about this privilege we get to go out and tell people about where they can spend eternity. Like, that's really, really good news, what Jesus did for us on the cross. So I was thinking about this as we were watching a TV show called Alone. Now, Alone is one of those shows where I would never ever sign up for it. Those of you that know me would get this. They drop 10 people off in a remote part in the wilderness with 10 items. So let's say sleeping bag is one item, a tarp is item 2, an axe is item 3, a bow and arrow is item 4. Like, you get it. There's not many, like a pan, a cooking pan, a wok, like everything, you only get 10. And they drop you off in the middle of nowhere all alone. And you have to survive. So you have to fish and hunt and build a shelter so you can be warm. So the season we were watching was season 7. It was filmed in the Arctic region of Canada. And I mean, it was so cold that every time we watched it, I'd be like, I just need to go take a hot bubble bath, because I just watching it made me cold. And I was laughing because Rob and I, well, when the weather was nice, we would go walking in the morning. We'd get up, we'd walk before the sun would rise, because we live in Arizona, we can do that. But then suddenly one day I woke up and it was like 45 degrees out. And I'm like, okay, my walking career is over. Like, all done, it's too cold for me. So I laughed because on this show that we were watching, it wasn't 40 degrees. They were dealing with 40 below zero. And they're totally alone. And the water on the lakes or wherever they're fishing is ice. So now they have to ice fish in hopes that they can get a fish. And it's so cold that their fire is going 24 hours a day, and it's still freezing in their shelter. Like, this is just bad. They had to chop their own firewood to make sure that their fire was going 24 hours a day. Like, it just sounds like just a disaster. Dusty was laughing. He goes, hey, Mom, how long do you think you could last out there? And I said, well, I would last 12 hours, because that's about how long it takes for me to get hungry. Because, I'm sorry, we have rabbits where we live. I would never, ever dawn on me to go out, shoot a rabbit with an arrow, skin it, and then eat it. Like, I'm not doing that, okay? And the same with a porcupine. They would shoot porcupines. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I want to go to a Mexican food restaurant, and I want it to be warm, and I want someone to cook for me. Like, that's my life. I could never, ever do this. So we laughed about how long I would last out there. Basically, not long at all. But here's the interesting thing, is that some of the people, they honestly couldn't handle it. They just couldn't. So they would tap out, they would call and say, gotta go, bye. And someone would come and pick them up and take them off the show. So it would dwindle, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and you'd have just a few left at the very end. Now, P.S., on this particular spoiler alert moment right here, I'm just gonna say this for all of you women out there. The women were tougher than the men, okay? If you watch this, you would be so shocked. Like, these women are just like, they're all in for this whole thing. And the men were dropping like flies. So anyway, that's a side note. But as the numbers dwindle, here's what I noticed, is that the people that were left, they didn't get up and whine. My life is miserable, I'm cold, well, they didn't do that. They got up, they saw the beauty around them, even though it was 40 below zero and it was freezing and they were starving and they needed to find food. Like, they looked around and they saw the good in all the bad. And they were excited. They would wake up excited for what the day would hold for them. And the one thing I kept hearing from them was this: what a privilege it is to be out here and to have the opportunity to do this. I saw their life as basically like a living hell. They saw it as a privilege. Every day was new. Every day was a challenge that they wanted to overcome. And in a couple of earlier seasons, there was a few of the people that actually were forced to leave because one guy was basically starving to death, and someone got hurt. And whenever they came and said, I'm sorry, you have to leave the show, they weren't happy. They were devastated, because they just felt like every day they were out there, they felt so blessed. So they made each day count. Now, imagine that kind of thinking as a follower of Jesus. You wake up with that kind of perspective, like, hey, God, here's the deal. My days are numbered, so how can I make today count for all eternity? Like no matter how difficult today is, no matter of the bad news I receive, no matter if I have a fight with my spouse or a job loss or a sickness or whatever, God, none of those things are shocking to you. So God, how can I make today count even though all that bad stuff is going on? Because remember what Moses said in Psalm 90 verse 12, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. How can I handle all of this? How can I be wise about what's going on in my life? So if that's the goal, then here's the question. Are we doing what is most important? Are we doing what is most important? Are we focusing on our relationship with God first? Like if you have kids at home, do they actually see you wake up in the morning and read your Bible? Do they see you getting up and taking them to church? Do they see you, doing things, listening to sermons, listening to Christian radio, whatever it is? Do they see you living out Psalms 31:14? But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. Verse 15, my times are in your hands. That's our choice. Are we focusing our life and looking towards God every day? Or are we, here you go, focusing on ourselves? Where we think our times are in our hands, not God's hands, but our hands. We want to go make money for me. We want to spend more time away from home than spend it with our family because that's just easier. We want to hang out with our friends at the bar instead of hang out with the kids. We want to hunt, fish, ride motorcycles, do whatever more because it's really all about me. I want to get as much out of life as I possibly can. But remember, as a follower of Jesus, our job is to focus on God first because every day should count for him. James reminds us of how this looks in James 4, verse 13. He says, now listen, you who say, hey, today or tomorrow we're going to go to this or that city, we're going to spend a year there, we're going to carry on business and make money. He says, why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. It's not about us. It's like, you know what, God, if you want me to do that, then I'm all in. Let's go do it. But God has to always come first. So, with all that in mind, here's the question. If I only have a certain number of days, who am I making those days about? Who am I making those days about? Am I making my life about God or am I making my life about me? Because Jesus says this in Matthew 6:19. He says, do not store up for yourself treasures on this earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So where is your treasure? What are you filling your days with? There was a movie many years ago called The Bucket List. Jack Nicholson was in it. He played a really rich guy. Morgan Freeman played a blue-collar worker. In the movie, they're in the same hospital room. They both have terminal cancer. They're dying. And as they're there, they're starting to reassess their life, and they put together a bucket list of things that they want to do before they die. Now, they got out of the hospital, and they went to do as many as they possibly could do. But for all the things that they saw and did on their bucket list, the bottom line is this: they were still going to die. And when they did, the Bible says this in Hebrews 9:27, just as man is destined to die once, and after that, to face judgment. See, if that's true, then judgment awaits on the other side of death. And having a bucket list is fun, and honestly, I hope you do everything on your bucket list. I'm not saying that a bucket list is a bad thing. I had a bucket list. I wanted to go in a hot air balloon. I wanted to go to Israel. I wanted to go see all the big, beautiful giraffes and lions in Africa. So I get that. And you should have a bucket list, and you should enjoy this life because God has given you every day to enjoy. But no matter what is on your list, that can't be what we're living for. It just can't be what we're living for because that's for here and now, and it's a short span of time, but what awaits us is eternity. We can't even fathom eternity. It's forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And that should be more important than anything else in our life. So how do we get there? And here's the answer. We have to live intentionally. We have to live intentionally. We have to wake up every morning and intentionally read our Bible. Open it, read it. What am I going to read today? We have to wake up in the morning and intentionally ask God, God, what do you want me to do today? What can I do for you today? We have to intentionally do things that will help us focus on our relationship with Jesus. We have to intentionally listen to a sermon, like maybe on your phone, on a YouTube channel, on your computer, whatever, as you're driving, like intentionally, instead of listening to this music, I'm going to listen to a sermon that will help my faith grow in Christ. Intentionally, I don't know, read a devotional, read a book, read something that teaches you something about God. But all that has to happen intentionally, because if we don't, then just every day we wake up and we just go about doing whatever we do, and we just forget God. We have to intentionally recognize that God has placed you on this earth for such a time as this. In your family, in your neighborhood, at your job. And He wants you to point other people to Jesus. And when we really get this, then our encouraging truth number 41 says this: you can make every day count. Because you're making every day count for something that matters, which is all eternity. Dr. F.W. Boreham tells about his stay one time at a quaint old cottage in England. It was occupied by a minister's widow. She had given him her bedroom, and in the morning he pulled back the blinds and he saw into the glass pane. The widow had cut these words, and it said this: "This is the day. This is the day." So he asked the elderly lady about it at breakfast, and she said, "You know, I had a lot of trouble in my life." She said, "I was always afraid what was going to happen tomorrow, what was going to happen next year." She says, "I always had all of this fear." And she said, "One day I read the words, 'This is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it.'" And she said, "I read it and it occurred to me that that meant this day, this day." And she said this, she said, "Why should I be afraid of the days if He makes them?" So she said, "I scratched that 'this is the day' into the window pane." She said, because I wanted that every time I drew the blinds in the morning, that I would remember that this is the day. This is the day the Lord has made, and she could rejoice and be glad in it. She didn't have to be afraid. So let's end with this thought. Not only do we not have to be afraid for tomorrow, but we need to wake up every morning excited. Excited that God has given us one more day, breath for that day, life itself. And remember, this is the day. This is the day that God has given you. And He wants you to live it for Him. He wants you to point people to Him. And that's why you really can make every day count when you live it completely intentionally for Him. I hope that helps this week. Have a really, really good week. Let's live life intentionally as we start this brand new year, 2021.